Hello and welcome to Tales of a Time Lord, and this is my top 10 stories to start John Pertwee's Third Doctor. So this is in my list of the beginner's guide to classic series Doctor Who. This is classic series if you've never watched it before, so these aren't particularly the best stories or the most popular stories. These are ones that I think a beginner would get into most, that have the most basic detail, the most easily understood stories. If you've never seen Doctor Who before, never seen classic series before particularly, and never seen John Pertwee's era before, these are the stories I recommend you getting into. Now, for a new Who comparison, these stories are mostly Earth-based, modern day Earth for the 1970s, so something similar to Series 1 or Series 8 I think is a strong comparison to this era. And also we have Roger Delgado's Master as a semi-regular lead. Certainly in some parts of this series he is like a full-on regular character, so similar to Missy as well in like Series 8 or 10 of Modern Who. That's the sort of thing you're aiming for. So if you're a fan of things like the Powerless State and Rose, or fan of Peter Capaldi and Michelle Gomez's Master, then the Third Doctor's era is a fantastic place to start. And yeah, here are the top 10 stories I would recommend you beginning this era with. So it will come as no surprise to classic series fans that my first recommendation is Spearhead from Space. This is the first story of the Third Doctor, but also I think it is the strongest story as a premiere story, sort of like the 11th Hour, something like that. It's a great clean break, relatively modern. It's the first colour story, so you can see they're trying new things with the colour. It's a very basic story, the Doctor versus the Autons, but yeah, you don't really need to know anything. It's a very clean start, but that doesn't stop it being entertaining and very gripping. And there is that modern series character, the Auton. And there's a very strong reason why Rusty Davies chose the Autons to bring it back in Rose, because this story works so well as a beginner story, but also as an entertaining, gripping story that will hopefully make you want to know more in the future. So, the Spearhead from Space is my first recommendation. My second recommendation is The Terror of the Autons. Now this is the following series beginner, so and this is a direct sequel. So in a way, if you think of like New Earth for Tennant and Rose, we're going into Gridlock now. That's essentially it. It's set on the same area, the same villain, this time being run by the Master in his first appearance. So if you're wanting to get into the Master strong stories in the Third Doctor's era, then this is a great place to start, because you get a beginner's guide to the Master here as well. As I say, it's a strong sequel, but you don't need to watch Spearhead from Space to get this one. It will work standalone. We get an introduction to Jo Grant, as I say, an introduction to the Master. And even though it is a second outing of the Autons, you don't need to know anything about them just yet. This will work as a standalone piece. And some of the technical difficulties that were being worked out in John Pertwee's first season in colour have been progressed a little bit. So if you struggle a bit with Spearhead from Space, which is not particularly unlikely, this one is a little bit more developed. But yeah, this is a fantastic second place to go for beginner. Terror of the Autons. The Time Warrior. This is, as part of a beginner's guide, this is a break-in to Sarah Jane. This is the first appearance of the Sontarans, so you do get a bit of a comedy villain with the Sontarans. It is set in history, so you got lots of battles, lots of bloodthirsty historical characters, and a Sontaran manipulating them all. And I'd say this is a strong start for Elizabeth Slade and Sarah Jane Smith. So we've introduced Jo Grant, Liz Shaw, the Master, now introducing Sarah. So yeah, if you struggle a little bit with this story, I wouldn't worry too much, because there are some elements that might be a bit off-putting, and I struggle myself. But if you are able to enjoy these elements, it's a good place to start. And Sarah Jane is going to be a big part of John Pertwee and Tom Baker later on. So she's a good character to get into, because she's going to stick around a lot. And if you enjoy the Sontarans in the modern series, the Sontaran Stratagem and Strax, it is nice to give them a little bit of an origin story. And even Flux with War of the Sontarans is a little bit of a sequel to this story, so that's great for a bit of context. The next story I recommend is Carnival of Monsters. This is a story where the Doctor and Joe Grant, without giving too much away, are stuck on a ship that appears to be time looping. But that's not the only thing going on here. There's lots of different elements. There is a metaphor for zoos and animal treatment. We have the story of the actual carnival, the man and the woman who run this place, and the alien planet that they're on. There's lots of different elements going on. There's little touches of slavery in there. As I say, there's animal rights and welfare. And it is generally an interesting story. There is lots of mystery going on, lots of comedy, and there's lots of different layers to the story that keep it interesting and keep it moving. When I was a kid watching Jon Pertwee stories, I would say the Carnival of Monsters is the story that got me gripped, and one that sort of turned me into a bit of a fan of Jon Pertwee. So if you're anything like me, then this story will be a great place to go to. It's just a bit silly. It's not that dark or scary, but it's very clever. There's lots of elements going on that'll hopefully keep your interest in the 1970s, which can be a bit of a tricky area for New Who fans. So if you're struggling at all, give Carnival of Monsters a try. Inferno. Now I'm steering clear of season 7 because I don't want this to go over 4 parts, and season 7 is almost entirely 7 parts, so we're looking at 2.5 to 3 hours here. But I think Inferno is a great place to go to. It's a story about the end of the world run by a madman who is so fixed on his goals he doesn't really care that he's going to end the universe. And the Doctor goes to a parallel world where he is attempting to fix his universe by learning what happens in another universe where the madman succeeds. That's not entirely the story, that's the general sort of premise. For a New Who comparison, the obvious places to go to are the wedding of River Song, where the actual gag of River Song wearing the eye patch comes from this story. It's sort of, a family vibe in a parallel universe. There's a bit of Rise of the Cybermen going on here, there's a bit of comedy with the characters being switched around. As I say, I don't really want to recommend anything longer than 4 parts, and this is 7, so I have created a Timetale version, which is just over an hour long, and on my Classic Who rewatch, which I'm going through presently, I watched my edit of Inferno for that, and it does work pretty well. So if you want to watch that, follow the link in the description. But yeah, I would highly recommend, particularly if you're going to watch the whole of Season 7, which is 25 individual episodes long. But if you want some more gripping sci-fi, end-of-the-world plot, something that's going to be really gripping to go at, then this is a strong place to try. My next recommendation is Day of the Daleks. Now, Jon Pertwee's era has 3 different Dalek stories. There are Day of the Daleks, Death to the Daleks, and Planet of the Daleks. They are very, very different stories from one another, but this one is particularly interesting. This is a story where the Daleks rule the world in the future, and then characters are sent back in time to kill people in the present to try and alter the future. If that story sounds at all familiar, it is basically The Terminator. Before The Terminator, in fact, because I believe this is 1972 or something like that, 71, and Terminator was actually 1984, so this is over a decade before The Terminator, but it is exactly the same storyline. If you think about the Daleks going back in time to kill John Connor, that is essentially the plot. It's really, really fun, it's really clever, there's lots of twists and turns, there's lots of battles. The only issue with this is it is slightly low budget. It's clear that the ambition was stronger than the realisation. There are only 3 Dalek props in this story, and I'm not sure if the people who created the Daleks for this story have actually watched the 1960s stories, because the behaviour and particularly the voices of the Daleks are nothing like they should be. So you have to suspend your imagination a little bit here, because it's clear that the production team couldn't pull off what they wanted to. However, there is the later on special edition, which I have, and I believe is the version on the iPlayer, where they reshoot some of the action sequences 1970s style, but do it a bit better. And Nick Briggs redoes the voice of the Daleks. So if you want to watch that version, that makes it a bit more like it should be.
All enemies of the Daleks must be destroyed. All enemies of the Daleks must be destroyed.
I think it's perfectly fine to watch the original version, but I also think that the new version will be a lot easier because things do sound and look like they should do. But yeah, if you can look past that and you love anything about 1980s sci-fi, even though this is 1970s, it is that sort of a vibe. It is very futuristic and advanced. And I think of the three Dalek stories in this era, this is my personal favourite. If you want to watch all three Dalek stories and compare and contrast, that is also a good idea because they're three very, very different stories that appeal to different fans. But this is the one that I would highly recommend, Day of the Daleks. My next recommendation is The Sea Devils. This is a story where the Master has been imprisoned for crimes against humanity in the previous season, and he is now working with the Sea Devils from prison to take over the world. There is a reason why the Sea Devils are so famous, having only had a couple of appearances. The Sea Devils are a fantastic character in this story. They are essentially the previous owners of the Earth. As we know with the Silurians, these are the aqueous version. These are the version of humanity that evolved into fish people rather than mammals. The Sea Devils is a fantastic story. It's got Joe Grant, it's got the Master. Roger Delgado here is probably his strongest Master ever, so if you want to get into the Master, Roger Delgado is the height of his acting power, and the writing is the height of the Master. It is absolutely brilliant. You can really feel like these are two Time Lords who are intellectually equal, like a Sherlock Holmes sort of vibe. There's some action sequences here. The Sea Devils are interesting. The plan is very multi-dimensional, so there's a lot of story going on with the plan. In terms of accessibility, it is a six-parter story, which I am regretful to introduce because I don't want to go up to 6 parts. However, as part of War Between, there is the shortened Ben Cook edit that is available on iPlayer, and on the War Between DVD there is that shortened version included. And I have also made my Timetail edit, which is not dissimilar to Ben Cook's version, but I made different edits because I didn't know his edit was going to come. So you can compare and contrast some of the different scenes that he and I have cut differently, if you like. But yeah, The Sea Devils is a great story for different elements of Pertwee. It's a slightly more complicated something that I can get your teeth into. The Master is very strong, the Sea Devils are very strong. A bit more of a sci-fi twist that you might find more enjoyable. This recommendation is The Claws of Axos. This is a 4-part story featuring the Axons of Axos, the Master and the Unit family in general. This is a quintessential 1970s story by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, who have become stalwarts of these 4-parter stories. They later did things such as The Hand of Fear and The Invisible Enemy. It's very, very fast-paced. It's only 4 parts, but it seems to run along as if it's a 6-parter. There's so much going on at once. It's a very simple plot, very simple enemy is the Axons. And I think people who brought up in the 1970s remember this story well. When you look up the Third Doctor and the Master, the Claws of Axons tends to be where you're dragged towards. The visual effects are a bit dodgy because 1970s Doctor was just learning how to do green screen and blue screen, so there's a lot of moments where you have to sort of look at it and giggle and go like, this didn't work out how I planned. But if you can excuse that, the story is strong, and for the sake of 4 parts, 90 minutes, you do get a lot for your buck. But it is also simple, so if you're not used to this format, you shouldn't struggle too much getting into it. It's very, very basic plot, bread and butter 1970s. So yeah, The Claws of Axos. My next recommendation is The Three Doctors. This is a very, very basic cut-in for Jon Pertwee. This is his Day of the Doctor, if you like, the first multi-Doctor story where Patrick Troughton comes back. So this is like Matt Smith meeting David Tennant, essentially. There's a little cutaway to William Hartnell, so you do have 3 Doctors, but I wouldn't worry about that. This is the first major appearance of Time Lords in Doctor Who, where we meet Omega, who is one of the founders of Time Lord Society trying to break out. So if you have watched The Reality War, then this is a handy place to watch Omega, because the depiction of Omega here is entirely different. This is not a metaphysical god brought into reality by the Rani. This is the original Omega, the original founder of Gallifrey. One of the most fantastic performances in Doctor Who. Incredibly, ridiculously overacted, but perfectly pitched for the story. Yeah, we get a bit of comedy with Jo Grant meeting Patrick Troughton. So if you like that sort of thing with the 10th Doctor meeting Lara and things like that, there's a bit of that going on. This is where essentially the comedic modern Doctor Who interpretation of meeting Doctors and that clash of personalities, this is where it originates. Yeah, nice simple 4-parter, a bit of a laugh. The comedic side of it is turned up a little bit as well, so if you want a bit of a fun, silly anniversary story, this is the place to go, The Three Doctors. And for my final recommendation, I'm going with The Curse of Peladon. Now, this is a very different story, but I think a lot of Third Doctor's fans want me to include this. This is sort of, if you can imagine the end of the world where you got lots of different alien races meeting, Cassandra, the Moxabalhoon, the Steward, all these characters. This is sort of a little bit like that. You got King Peladon, you got Alpha Centauri, you got the Ice Warriors, many different layers of different characters meeting. This is a tale of the 1970s with a bit of the European Union, as was discussed in the 1970s, and eventually the UK joined the EU. So this is a modern day political story for the 1970s, but also a bit of an Agatha Christie murder mystery whodunit kind of plot. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this. I find it a little bit slow and boring, but this is not only my recommended list, so I think if I'm going to recommend all different vibes, if you want to try 10 different stories at different angles, different things that different fans might enjoy, I think this is a strong place to go, because if you don't like what I've chosen for you, Curse of Peladon is something very different that you might find is more to your appeal. It does also have a sequel with the Monster of Peladon, which is very different, but sort of, as I say previously, like a end of the world turned to gridlock. It's set on the same planet years later. So if you want to try a 2-parter sort of story, then Curse and Monster together. But yeah, just give this one a go. So yeah, that is my top 10 list. So yeah, out of John Pertwee's 5 seasons, there is a lot to go at. You got Liz Shaw, Jo Grant, Sarah Jane. His era goes through a lot of different places with sci-fi, historical, futuristic, a lot of political storylines. There's a lot to get your teeth into, so I've tried to make this top 10 list as varied as possible. I hope there's something in there for everyone. Let me know in the comments how you get on and what you would recommend. And I'm also, after I get done with this sequence for the very, very basic beginner's guide, I might introduce more 6-parters, 7-parters, so if you want to suggest things I could include in those lists later on. I am just getting close towards the end of Tom Baker now, so I'll be moving on to my Tom Baker lists next. Let me know what you want to include in that one, and I will see you next time.